He called me his baby sister, promised he'd never let anyone hurt me. But I didn't know anyone meant him. But then, I became the curse he could never escape. He called me his baby sister, promised he'd never let anyone hurt me. And I believed him. Every single word. Because when you grow up with nothing but shadows, even the smallest flicker of love looks like the sun. For me, that sun had a name, Arav. My big brother. My protector. My entire world. We weren't born with silver spoons or warm lullabies. We were born in a house where walls were too thin to hide the yelling, and silence was louder than screams. Our parents fought like enemies, loved like strangers, and in between all that wreckage, Arav would wrap his little arms around me and say, "No matter what happens, baby sis, I've got you." He meant it then. And I clung to that like it was the only truth in a world full of lies. I was barely 6 when I first learned how to flinch at slammed doors. But Arav, he learned to fight back. He'd stand in front of me, fists clenched, even when he was scared out of his mind. He took my nightmares and turned them into bedtime stories. He wiped my tears with trembling hands and swore that one day, he'd take me far away from all of this. And maybe that's why I never saw it coming. Maybe that's why the pain hit harder, because it didn't come from a stranger. It came from the only person I ever trusted. But we're not there yet. No. Back then, Arav was still my hero. And I was just the little girl who smiled only when he did. As we grew up, things didn't magically get better, but Arav became smarter, stronger, colder to the world, but never to me. He shielded me from our parents' growing darkness. He made sure I had clean clothes for school, even if it meant he wore the same shirt for a week. He worked part-time while still in school, saved his lunch money just so I could have birthday gifts, and kept telling me, "Just hold on, Sia. One day, we'll breathe in a place where no one yells, no one hits, no one hurts." I counted on that dream like it was already real. By the time he was 17 and I was 13, he'd become both my brother and my parent. And when our mother walked out and our father drank himself into oblivion, it was Arav who became my everything. He cooked. He cleaned. He listened. He stayed. And every night, when I cried silently under the blanket, he'd whisper through the wall, "You're safe. I promise." But promises, they have a shelf life. And some are made just to be broken. Things started changing slowly, like poison slipping into water. At first, I thought it was just stress. Arav was working more hours, taking night shifts, and coming home quiet. He stopped talking about dreams and started avoiding eye contact. But still, he'd kiss my forehead and smile when I got good grades. He still called me baby sis and packed me lunch before school. I held on to those small signs like a fool. What I didn't know then was this. Some monsters don't hide under your bed. They sleep in the room next to yours. They wear familiar faces. They learn how to make you feel safe before they turn safety into a weapon. And Arav, my Arav, he was learning how to turn love into control. One evening, I remember coming home late from school. I'd stayed behind to study with a friend. Nothing unusual. But when I walked in, he was already waiting. His jaw clenched. His eyes cold. "Why didn't you answer your phone?" he asked, a voice too calm. "I didn't hear it," I said, confused. "We were in the library." He didn't say anything. He just took my phone, scrolled through my messages, and then tossed it back. "Don't make me worry like that again." I laughed nervously. "Arav, I'm fine. You're acting like I was out partying or something." He didn't laugh. That was the first time I felt something shift in the air between us. That was the first time I felt like a prisoner in the house we call home. I didn't know it yet, but that was the beginning of 1,000 tiny chains wrapping around me. Chains made of love, guilt, obligation, and fear. But I still loved him. Still trusted him. Because he was Arav. The boy who used to sleep on the cold floor so I could have the mattress. The boy who stood between me and fists that weren't even meant for him. The boy who promised to never let anyone hurt me. How could that boy turn into the person who would become my greatest pain? I didn't know it yet, but the answer was already breathing down my neck. I wish I could say that moment, the cold stare, the harsh silence, was just a one-time thing. But it wasn't. It was the seed. And from that seed grew something so twisted, so invisible, even I didn't see it until it was too late. Arav didn't yell. He didn't hit. He didn't scream. No, he controlled with care. He trapped with love. He broke me with quiet disappointment. At first, it was simple things. Let me drop you to school. I don't want you walking alone. Don't talk too much to the boys in your class. They don't have good intentions. Wear something else, that dress. It's not safe. And because I adored him, I listened. I obeyed. I changed. Because in my head, he was still my big brother, the one who knew better, the one who protected me all my life. But slowly, it stopped being about safety. It became about control. I remember the day he followed me after school. I'd gone to the bookstore with my friend Priya. Just 15 minutes of laughter. 15 minutes of pretending I wasn't walking on eggshells every day. When I turned the corner to head home, I saw him, leaning against his bike, watching. There was no anger on his face, just quiet judgment. The kind that makes you feel like filth even when you've done nothing wrong. Were you with that girl Priya again? He asked. I nodded, unsure of what I'd done wrong. I told you, Sia. She's not the kind of girl you should be around. My stomach dropped. She's my friend. He stepped forward. Not with violence. With silence. That's exactly what they said about Ma, he whispered. Look where she ended up. I froze. What did that even mean? But I didn't argue. Because I knew from experience, when Arav was quiet like that, he wasn't listening. Over the next few months, I watched my world shrink around me. He installed a security camera at the front door, just in case. He started tracking my phone location, because it made him feel better. He read through my texts, so he could protect me from bad people. At first, it felt like love. The kind that's suffocating, but still warm. The kind that wraps around you like a blanket, until you realize it's strangling you. He even started deciding what I'd wear, what I'd eat, when I'd study, when I'd sleep. And every time I tried to speak up, he'd say it with a smile. You're my baby sister. I know what's best for you. You trust me, right? And like a fool, I nodded. Because by then, I was so used to being protected, I didn't know what freedom looked like anymore. Then came the worst part. The part that shattered whatever pieces of innocence I had left. One evening, I was sitting on the sofa, reading, when he came and sat beside me. Nothing unusual. But then he put his arm around me. And his hand lingered too long. I thought I was imagining it. I wanted to believe I was imagining it. But the next time, it was more obvious. Too close. Too familiar. Too wrong. And when I flinched, his smile faded. What? He asked, as if I was the one making things awkward. I didn't reply. I couldn't. My throat felt like it was closing in. You've changed, he said, almost hurt. You used to hug me without thinking. I wanted to scream, because I was a child, Arav. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I got up and went to my room. Locked the door. Sat on the bed and trembled. And for the first time in years, I was scared. Not of the world outside, but of the only person I thought would never hurt me. The next few days, I avoided him. I stopped talking unless I had to. I locked my door at night, and he noticed. He tried being sweet again. Made my favorite food. Left sticky notes with I love you, baby sis, on my mirror. But the fear had cracked something inside me. And once something cracks, it never goes back to how it was. One night, I confronted him. My voice shaking, but firm. You make me uncomfortable sometimes, I said. He stared at me, as if I'd slapped him. I'd do everything for you, he said coldly. I gave up my entire life for you. And that's when I saw it. The truth. His love wasn't love. It was possession. And the worst kind of betrayal is the one that hides behind sacrifice. He didn't talk to me for days after that. But I didn't care anymore. Something had broken. I started secretly applying for college scholarships far from home. I made a second email address, borrowed phones from friends to avoid being tracked, hid my real journal inside the cover of an old textbook, because I knew Arav wasn't going to let go easily, and I had to leave before his love consumed me completely. I still remember the last time I looked at him the way I used to, with love, with gratitude, with blind trust. After that, all I saw was the man who turned my world into a prison. All I saw was the enemy I never expected to fear. By the time I turned 18, I had mastered the art of pretending. Pretending to smile. Pretending to be the obedient little sister. Pretending I didn't notice how his eyes watched me too closely. How his fingers brushed against my back a second longer than necessary. But behind every smile, I was planning. Counting the months. Counting the days. Counting every heartbeat that didn't belong to me anymore. I knew I couldn't confront him again. Not directly. Arav had power, not just over me, but over the image he'd built for himself. He was adored in our neighborhood. People said things like, "He's such a responsible brother. He sacrificed so much for Sia. She's lucky to have him." They didn't know that luck can sometimes look like a cage gilded in gold. That even a curse can smile if you teach it how. My first act of rebellion was small. I skipped my evening tea with him, something we'd done since I was 10. He noticed. "Everything okay?" he asked with that tilted head, the one that looked soft but held shadows. "Just tired," I lied. "College prep is draining." His eyes narrowed, but he didn't press. Not then. But that night, I found my drawer opened. My journal. Moved. I had written nothing incriminating in it. That one was decoy. My real thoughts, my real plans, they were hidden in a makeup box beneath layers of old lipstick tubes and broken kajal sticks. I was playing chess with a man who thought he was God. One evening, Priya messaged me. "Got the forms. We'll apply together." Imagine finally being free. The message didn't reach me because I never got to read it. Arav had my phone. He'd installed spyware months ago. The next morning, Priya stopped talking to me. No explanation. Just a blank look in the hallway. And that night, Arav came home with a gift. A new phone. "Your old one was glitchy," he said. "I got you a better one." I didn't say a word. I just took the phone, smiled, and swallowed the scream that was burning the back of my throat. That was the moment I knew. He was listening. Watching. Controlling. So I adapted. Started using the public library's computer. Created secret folders hidden in boring PDFs. Sent college applications from a dummy email. Used school events as excuses to stay longer and meet with counselors. I built a web around myself. A false image. So convincing, even he couldn't see the cracks forming underneath. But what I didn't expect was how far he would go when he felt me slipping. One rainy evening, I came home late. Not too late, just enough to remind myself that time belonged to me too. He was waiting, his hands resting on the kitchen table. A letter in front of him. One of my college acceptance letters. I froze. He didn't speak. Not until I reached for the letter. That's when his hand slammed over it. "You were going to leave," he whispered, his voice so quiet it scraped against the silence. "I deserve a life, Arav," I said. "I'm not a child anymore. You're mine," he snapped, and for the first time, the mask cracked completely. "Everything I did for you. You think you can just walk away?" I looked him in the eye. And I said something that shattered whatever delusion he'd been holding onto. "I'm not yours. I never was. You just needed someone to control. Because you couldn't control your own darkness." He didn't speak. Didn't yell. Didn't scream. He just walked out. But the silence he left behind, it screamed louder than anything I'd ever heard. That night, the locks on my door were broken. My drawers emptied. My backup plans scattered across the floor. He had gone through everything. Every letter. Every printed email. Every paper I'd hidden. And when I opened my laptop, it wouldn't turn on. Dead. Just like the last piece of my old life. I realized then, he wasn't going to let me go. Not by force. Not by reason. Not by blood. He needed me trapped, dependent, terrified. But what he didn't realize was that the more he tried to crush me, the sharper I became. Like glass ground down to dust, invisible, but capable of cutting the soul. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. Didn't beg. I just stood in the center of that wrecked room and began writing a new plan, one that didn't just help me escape. It would destroy him. Because if he was the storm that ruined my childhood, I was going to be the wildfire that burned down everything he ever built. The next morning, I didn't cry. Didn't flinch. Didn't let him see the terror cloying beneath my skin. I smiled at Arav like nothing had happened. "Thanks for cleaning my room," I said softly, slipping a knife between my words. He smiled back, too quickly, too wide. It wasn't love. It was pride. Control. Possession. And I realized, he thought he'd won. He thought he'd scared me enough to give up. To stay. But I had learned something more dangerous than anger. Patience. And patience, when fueled by betrayal, becomes a weapon even monsters can't survive. That afternoon, I went to school like normal. Gave him no reason to follow. No reason to worry. But instead of attending class, I walked straight to the counselor's office. "Miss." Nair had always sensed something was off. She once said, "If you ever need help, and you can't say it out loud, draw a storm cloud on your notebook." So I walked in, handed her a paper, and drew 3 storm clouds at the bottom. She looked up, and I whispered, "I'm ready to talk." I told her everything. Not just about Arov's control, but the invasion, the manipulation, the emotional leash around my neck. Her hands shook. Her eyes welled up. She didn't ask if I was exaggerating. She didn't say, "But he's your brother." She said, "We'll get you out." And that one sentence gave me more strength than 100 promises ever had. By evening, everything had been set in motion. A hidden recording device was tucked in my backpack. A duplicate of my college acceptance letter was stored in a secure folder, along with proof of Arov's surveillance apps, screenshots of his spyware, and text logs from my old phone, which the tech teacher helped me retrieve. But I knew it wouldn't be enough to escape. I needed to expose him. Because monsters like him, they don't just need to be escaped. They need to be burned in the daylight. That night, I told him what he wanted to hear. "You were right," I whispered. "I don't want to leave." I was just confused. He smiled, and it was the ugliest thing I'd ever seen. A smile carved from arrogance. And when he leaned down to hug me, I flinched, just enough for the recorder to pick up the shiver in my voice when I said, "You'll never hurt me again, right?" And he whispered, "Never. Because if you try to leave again, you won't be able to." There it was. The threat. The leash. And I had it on tape. The next morning, I submitted the evidence to the counselor and a trusted legal aide who worked with the school. They didn't waste time. Social services were alerted. A protection officer was assigned. And an emergency stay was granted. I wouldn't have to go back home that night. But before I left, I had one last thing to do. I left a letter on Arov's pillow. Not for forgiveness. Not for closure. But for clarity. "You always said you'd protect me from anyone. But you became the thing I needed protecting from. You watched me grow, only to cut my wings when I was ready to fly. You destroyed my friendships, stole my voice, and called it love. But now, I've taken back everything you tried to bury. And you'll never be able to silence me again." I signed it with one line. The baby sister who grew fangs. The fallout was swift. Arov's face drained of all color when two officers showed up at our house. He tried to argue, to lie, to paint me as hysterical. But lies sound different when played back in your own voice. Especially when they come wrapped in threats. Especially when a girl who never once said no finally screams it loud enough for the world to hear. He wasn't arrested that day, but a restraining order was filed. Investigations began. His name started to rot in the very community that once praised him. The same people who said he's such a good brother now whispered, "Did you hear what he did? Poor Sia, all these years. He always seemed too perfect, didn't he?" Arov didn't just lose his image. He lost his mask. And when monsters are seen without their masks, they can never walk the streets the same way again. But this was just the beginning. Because while justice was starting to crawl forward, revenge was just beginning to rise. They say when you expose a monster, he either disappears or becomes desperate. Arov chose desperation. He started showing up outside my college, waiting near bus stops, calling from private numbers, begging, threatening, switching between "I'm sorry" and "you ruined me" like a man drowning in his own lies. But I didn't flinch anymore. Because I'd learned something stronger than fear. I'd learned the power of being believed. I didn't stay silent. I spoke at a survivor support seminar organized by our college. I shared everything without naming him, but everyone who needed to know understood. I could see it in their eyes. The shock. The betrayal. The shift. He was no longer the golden boy. He was a cautionary tale in a brother's skin. And slowly, people started talking. Girls from his past. Friends he ghosted. Even an old tutor who said he always crossed lines he pretended not to see. It wasn't just me. I had only been the one to light the match. Now the fire was spreading. One evening, I received a message on a private support forum. "I knew Arov too. Not the way you did. But he hurt me too. Thank you for speaking up. You gave me the courage to tell my story." Another girl. Then another. Then three more. None of them had come forward before. But now, the silence was cracking. What was once my personal hell had now become his public reckoning. I documented every message, every story, every thread that linked him to the monster only I used to see. And I sent it, anonymously, to every job application he had ever submitted, every scholarship program, every alumni group, every HR inbox connected to his LinkedIn. No lies. No fake accusations. Just truth. And truth, when given oxygen, doesn't just speak. It screams. A few weeks later, he lost a major job offer. Then another. His reputation, the thing he built brick by polished brick, began to crumble. Not because I destroyed him, but because he built it on a foundation of rot. I just pulled back the curtain. One night, he finally broke. He cornered me outside a bookstore near campus. His eyes wild. His voice trembling. "You told them lies. You ruined me. I was your brother, your protector." I looked him in the eye and said the words I had been dying to say since the first time he locked the door behind me. "You were never protecting me. You were protecting your control." And then I added, "And now, no one's protecting you from me." The security guard stepped out from behind the shelves. My friends, waiting nearby, started recording. Arov stumbled back. His illusion had shattered, and he knew. This wasn't about hate anymore. It was about balance. And I had finally tipped the scale. But revenge, real revenge, isn't just about exposure. It's about transformation. Because what hurts monsters the most is not your pain. It's your survival, your glow, your growth, your refusal to stay broken. I started mentoring younger girls at the shelter. Taught them how to recognize manipulation masked as love, how to set boundaries, how to listen to their own voice over anyone else's. And every time I saw a flicker of confidence return in a girl's eyes, it was a wound healing inside me too. One day, I walked past Arov's old group of friends. They didn't greet me. They didn't look away either. They just stood there, awkward, ashamed. And one of them, a guy who once laughed at my shyness, muttered, "I didn't know." "I'm sorry." I didn't reply, because their guilt wasn't mine to carry. Not anymore. Arov's world had grown smaller. His charm had turned to suspicion. His connections, once limitless, were now afraid to be seen with him. And me? I stood on a stage a year later, giving a speech about surviving family betrayal. And when I ended, I said, "They called me little sister, but little sisters grow up. And when we do, we don't wait to be saved. We become the reckoning." They say the past can't be changed. But sometimes, when you dig deep enough into it, you don't change it. You expose it. And that's exactly what I was about to do. Because there was still one part of Arov's lie that hadn't been brought into the light. Not the abuse. Not the manipulation. But something older. Something darker. Something buried within our family history. I returned to our old home. The house where everything began. The quiet halls. The echoing silences. The walls that saw everything and spoke nothing. Mom was gone for the weekend. Dad had passed years ago. And Arov had been banned from coming near me. So I was alone. But I didn't feel scared. Not anymore. I went to the attic. A place where old boxes lived. Dust-covered memories. Photographs no one had touched in years. I opened a wooden chest tucked in the corner. Inside, I found a stack of journals, my mother's. She had always been quiet, passive. But her words? They were loud. And what I read next tore open a truth even I wasn't ready for. Arov's anger worries me. He watches Sia too closely. I thought it was just overprotectiveness. But I've seen him try to isolate her. The way he speaks about her sometimes, like he owns her. He's not the boy I raised. I don't know how to stop what's coming. God help me. I don't know how to stop him. That was written when I was just 12. 12. That means she knew. She suspected. She saw something, and still stayed silent. Another entry. 2 years later. Sia flinched when he touched her shoulder today. She didn't say anything. I asked if he'd ever done something, and she said no. But her eyes were screaming yes. I should do something. But I don't want to break the family. Break the family? The family was already broken. And I had been the one bleeding from its shattered glass. I took photos of every page. Every word she wrote. And I included them in a letter. Not to the police. Not to the media. But to her. My mother. Because she didn't just fail to protect me. She chose comfort over confrontation. And now, she would read her guilt in her own handwriting. When she returned and found the envelope on the kitchen counter, I watched her through the window from outside. She sat, read, shook, cried, and for once, she didn't come after me. Because she knew. She wasn't just the bystander. She was the silence that let him thrive. A week later, I received a voicemail from her. Tear-stained voice, cracked and trembling. "I'm sorry. I don't deserve forgiveness. I let you suffer. I let him win. I hope someday you find peace. Even if it's far from me." I never called back. Because forgiveness isn't owed. And some wounds don't deserve to be wrapped in apologies. Meanwhile, Arov had grown more paranoid. He messaged an old friend of mine, accusing me of destroying his life, saying I had turned everyone against him. He couldn't see it wasn't me. It was the mirror. He was finally being forced to look at the monster he had spent years pretending didn't exist. I ran into him one last time. At a family function neither of us could avoid. He looked hollow. Gone was the confident smirk. Gone was the carefully rehearsed charm. All that was left was a man unmasked. He pulled me aside. Tried one last time. We can move on from this, Sia. We're blood. We're family. Just stop telling people. Please. I looked him in the eyes. And I said it calmly. You wanted to be remembered. Now you are. Just not the way you hoped. Because now, every room he entered whispered his truth. Every job he applied to led to a quiet rejection. Every friendship carried a doubt. And every time he closed his eyes, he saw me. Not as the scared little sister he once controlled, but as the storm he never imagined could rise. Sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's exposure. A slow, steady unraveling. Where the world doesn't watch you burn, it watches you wither. And that's exactly what was happening to Araf. One by one, his secrets stopped being shadows. The people he used to manipulate, friends, exes, even colleagues, they started reaching out to me. Some apologized for not believing me back then. Some confessed they'd seen red flags but stayed silent. Others shared stories of their own scars. Turns out, I hadn't just broken my silence. I'd given voice to many. Araf tried everything. He switched cities, deleted his social media, sent legal threats disguised as cease and desist letters, spread rumors about my mental health, saying I was making things up for attention. But truth? Truth has a strange habit of sticking around, especially when it's been caged for too long. Then one day, I received an email from a documentary filmmaker. She had come across my story through someone I didn't even know. She wanted to tell it. At first, I hesitated. Was I really ready to be that visible? But then I thought, how many Sias were out there? Still hiding, still bleeding, still convinced that silence was survival? And I said yes. The documentary didn't name Araf directly, but anyone who knew us knew. Old photos were blurred, voices disguised, but the story, bruh, unfiltered, real. The world watched. And for the first time, I wasn't just a girl who had survived something. I was a woman who had turned survival into power. Araf couldn't handle the quiet war that followed. The relatives who stopped inviting him. The friends who ghosted him. The colleagues who started whispering when he entered a room. He posted vague, pitiful rants online. They only believe her because she's a woman. I made one mistake. She's ruining my life. Family doesn't destroy family. But I didn't respond. Because now, he was doing exactly what he once forced me to do. Scream into silence. I created a foundation. A safe house for siblings and children abused by the very people meant to protect them. We named it Unspoken Bonds. The irony? Arav used to say, we have a bond no one can break. And now, I turned that bond into a beacon for others to break their silence. He tried applying for a job abroad, but my documentary had been translated. Clips had gone viral. People asked questions. His visa was denied. His world? Shrinking. Mine? Expanding. One evening, I got a letter. No return address. No signature. But I knew it was from him. Inside, just a few scribbled lines. I lost everything. You win. Was that your plan all along? I laughed bitterly. Win? This wasn't a game. This was survival. And the fact that he still didn't get it was proof he never would. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about making him feel what I felt. It was about making sure no one else ever had to feel that way again. So I burned the letter. Watched the flames swallow his last attempt to touch me. Because when you've truly healed, you don't just bury your demons. You build something beautiful from their ashes. Still, I know this. Some nights, when everything is quiet, when Araf's alone with nothing but himself, he thinks of me. Not the little sister he once protected, but the storm he created, the curse he called down on himself when he crossed the one soul who trusted him the most. He thought I'd stay silent forever, that I'd carry the shame while he walked free. But now, every whisper feels like mine. Every room he enters holds the weight of what he did. He can't run from it because I never had to chase him. The truth does that for me. I'm no longer his baby sister. I'm the shadow he cast and can't escape. The voice he tried to silence now echoes louder than ever. He broke me thinking I'd stay broken. But I became the curse he'd never outrun. The ending he never saw coming.